Welcome. We're finally able to film episode 1 of my Easy Crochet Eve's Way. And if you saw the intro, we'll be just very briefly reviewing what I went over into the intro to this class. If you haven't seen it, stop for a second, go find it here at YouTube. It's the intro to my Easy Crochet. And it just goes over a little bit of types of hooks and things like that, what you need for class. So for this one, we will briefly review that because I think it's very important to go over some of what we talked about before. First of all, the type of hooks. This big fella is as big as they come. This is made of wood. It's by Chow Gu. And this is what I call, I haven't seen this anywhere, but I call it a slot. You see how it's a definite straight slot there. And that's good for grabbing multiple strands of things that are slippery, things that you're having a hard time pulling through. So this is a good bad boy for that. This shape you'll see very often in hooks as well. I call it a crook because it looks like a shepherd's crook. It's got a definite curve happening there. Now the positives about this is that crook shape slides easily and quickly through stitches. So if you have something that you don't worry about coming apart like a felted yarn, you can make quick work of it with this. Now, as I said before, I'm not a fan of plastic, and I don't like that head shape as much, but that's just me. And these are widely available. I think this is a Susan Bates. This one's a boy, and those are at Walmart. A couple of other types of hooks out there are this one by Clover with the flat handle. The reason it's flat is so it's always oriented in your hand, and you know where the top part of that crook is and where the bottom is. They're easy to hold. I don't like that the neck only goes to here. This shaft here is where you make your stitch, not down here. That's just where you put it in. To have a consistent stitch size, make sure you're wrapping your loops right up here because that's where you get the same size. And so that's one type of that. Here's another one by Tulip. These started in Japan and got widely popular. This is like a rubberized grip, which is nice. But again, you can only fit a few stitches on there, especially the way that I hold it. And then this one is an old-fashioned, I think it's a Susan Bates. Yeah, this one's ancient. But it's one of my favorites. It's a size like in the mid-range that's good for like a worsted weight yarn. It's got a nice slot. Let me see. I don't want to be blurry. There we go. It's got a nice slot on it. And the head shape is what I like. And the handle goes all the way down straight. And that takes me to the hand hold. Please hold it like this. Back in the day, they had ladies hold their hooks this way because they thought it was prettier, like holding it like a pencil. But you have very little range of motion if you do that. If you do it this way, you're doing a bigger motion, which is better for you. Better for your arm, better for your hand, and it helps you to avoid the dreaded death grip. The death grip is what I call it when you've got a new crocheter and they're holding it like this and they pull it through too tight. So if you're holding it overhand, it's a little bit less likely that you'll be death gripping. So just try not to. Now here to my chart. This we used the other day, but I'll go over it briefly. This is my way of explaining relativity in crochet. In this, the way that I break it down is this. Here, let me scooch it up just a tad. And we rock it low tech around here. So there we go. I made this chart to illustrate that in crochet, all you're talking about really is a relative height. And by that, I mean that all the stitches are formed basically the same way. The only difference is they're different combinations of the basic units, and that's all they are. And there's not that much to learn as far as that goes. So here we have a chain stitch. Thus, the name of our class today is Chain, Chain, Chain. And we're talking mostly about chain stitches and some single crochet. So that's how tall a chain stitch is on its side, which is the same as a single crochet. And on a chart, that would be represented by an X. This loop down here is a chain stitch. This dot is a slip stitch. This is the abbreviation down here. And a slip stitch is basically just moving and traveling, slipping the yarn from one place to another so that you're ready to make the next stitch. It's basically a negative. It's not tall in any way. A chain stitch is a little bit of a bump. It's almost flat as well. And in a in directions you'll see CH for chain, and a chain stitch is just this loop, and that is what it looks like when you're crocheting. Then a single crochet is 1 unit of stitches. But I took this box on this graph paper and I decided that that's 1 unit tall. If you put a chain stitch on its side, it's about the same height as a single crochet. 2 chain stitches, 2 single crochets equals our next stitch, which unfortunately is called a half double, which isn't real helpful for newbies, but this is a half double that's 2 units high, as tall as 2 of these, or 2 chains on its side. On a chart, it looks like a capital T with no lines through it, and it's a half double crochet, HDC. Add another unit. Let's go 3 chains tall. 1, 2, 3. That's a double crochet. And it's the same as 3 chains or 3 single crochets. It's represented on a chart by a big T with this one little line through it. And so it'd be like 3 times as tall as these down here. And a double crochet we use a lot. It's a very popular stitch. If you're at the beginning of a row, you'll chain 3 instead of starting with a double crochet because it's more stable and strong. And today we're not getting into this stitch, but just to show you relative wise, 4 chains high would be a triple crochet. It's got 2 lines through it on a chart. It would be a big T with 2 lines. And with all of these T's, the bottom of the T is where you insert the hook. With a slip stitch, the dot is where you put the hook. And so that helps you too. And we'll get into charts more later, but this is just your basic overview. And today we're going to be doing a chain and a little bit of single crochet. Okay, so your first stitch is going to be chaining. Do not pick up a hook yet though. We're going to practice without a hook because I think it teaches you to understand what we're doing a lot better than having a hook in your hand for the first time. So get your piece of yarn. You probably have some worsted. I'm using a piece of my Twyla twine, which is a baker's twine that I re-engineered. And I used my hand-dyed wool for this, and it stays together beautifully. This has been washed. So this is how we're going to start. Okay, take your yarn, and we're going to make a loop. You can either twist backwards, and that's a loop, or just fold it in half, push the loop through, and that works. There are other ways to make a slip knot, but for now, let's just keep it super simple. So you've got a tail hanging down, and you've got your working yarn. Okay, you can kind of hold on to the tail. It gives you something to start with, and put both of your fingers through this nice big loop. Don't pull the loop too tight. Leave it pretty big there. Okay, let's reach through. Hold on to the tail with your left hand or your non-dominant. Reach through, pull another loop. Don't pull it too tight. We've made 1 chain. Reach through again, pull it. We've made another chain. Okay, we have 1, 2 chains now. You don't count the loop that's on your finger. That's basically just like whatever your next stitch is going to be. So whenever you're counting up chains, start down here, but don't count that one. Okay, let's make another one. Reach through and pull. You notice how loose everything is? I'm not pulling anything tight. If you are at first, it's understandable, but just try not to. Keep these loops big. You're making a big old chain. Okay, let's make another one. Okay, there we go. See, it's getting longer. It's starting to hang by its own weight. Your hand moves up and you hold on to the chain rather than the tail. Pull through, make another one. Pull through, make another one. And you see there's really no tension on my yarn yet because we're working so loosely. When we're making smaller chains, I'm going to show you how to tension the yarn in your other hand. But for now, let's just let it slide over your finger. Okay, keep looping on through. Okay. Getting easier? All right, just keep pinching on through. And if you're feeling bold, you can just reach through with 1 finger like you would with a hook. And spread it open with your fingers. Let's reach through like a hook again. Okay, got it. Very good. So practice that. You can even pause the video if you like and practice it a few times and practice counting them too. And I'll be right back with you with my hook and the yarn that we'll be using to demo today. Okay, this is going to be my working yarn. This is a light worsted weight. It's a cotton acrylic blend. So the acrylic gives it a little bit of bounce, like I told you to in the intro. Find something with a little bit of stretch. And we're going to start with our slip knot. And the way I do it is I just reach through and make my first chain. And then there you go. You got yourself a slip knot. Again, you've got a tail and you've got your working yarn. And by the way, I've chosen to use a metric size 4.5 millimeters. This is a US 7. It's kind of a hard hook to find. It's between like a G and an H. And hook sizes, unfortunately, are all over the map, depending on where you are. So you can learn it by millimeters, and you can learn it by the American letter system, too. So if you've got a G or an H hook, that would work fine, too. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to tension. Take your hand and weave your yarn through. You see how it's going in through my fingers? And the tensioning is going to take place by being woven through. Now, even though this is going to feel strange at first, I urge you to learn it this way. Because if you've learned it this way, you'll do it without even thinking. And then every time you grab it, boom, you'll just do it. And then when I'm knitting, I do the same thing with my right hand. Or if I'm knitting with both hands, if I'm doing two colors, I tension it that way in both hands. And then I go back and forth. But that's another class. Okay, there's our working yarn. There is our first working loop, but that we don't count it as a chain one, just a loop. Ready? Tension through your left hand as much as you can, and then with the front of your hand, like your fingers and your thumb, hold onto your tail. And this is called yarning over, and that's important because you can make a chain two ways. You can just hook it and pull it through, and I've seen people do this without even thinking. Hook and pull it through, and hook and pull it through, and you know what happens? You're feeding in a lot less yarn into that stitch, and the stitch is going to be smaller and less consistent. So get in the habit of doing what the Brits call yarn round hook, yarn over. They even had YRH, yarn round hook, in their directions. And make sure you go the long way around, like this. And that way you are feeding enough yarn into each stitch. I'm going to try to get closer without getting blurry. Let's see how that does. Okay, ready? Here we go. I'm holding on. I'm tensioned. And here we go. Yarn round hook, pull through. That's one. Again, chain two, chain three. Okay, let's get a rhythm going where the yarn is working its way through my hand. I'm pinching with my thumb and my other fingers, and as the chain gets longer, I just automatically work my way up and hold on a little bit higher, but not tightly. Okay, and what you're going for here when you're first learning is to try to get your stitches all about the same size, and the hook will help you to do that. As long as you're not pulling it tightly and then pulling it loosely, that'll give you different sizes. So yarn round hook, pull through, yarn round hook, pull through. Now some people really rotate their hook when they're pulling it through the yarn, like, see how it's slipping off? Like this. But the problem with that is not only does it slip off, but it's kind of a lot of extra motion you don't necessarily need. Some stitches, yeah, you want to hook it a little bit, but you can just turn it a bit. And my hook is a little bit small for this yarn, so it's slipping a little bit. Okay, so there's our chain. Now take a look at your chain. There are two definite sides to a chain. This side is usually considered the prettier side. It looks like kind of flat loops and V's. Some people call it a heart shape. And that's the front of the chain. Turn it over, and you've got all these little bumps. If you knit, you'll recognize it, kind of like pearl bumps. There we go. And see how those little bumps sticking up? That is probably the best place to put your hook when you turn around and you start to make fabric. and you come back the other way to make another row. And that way, when you're done with your piece of fabric or whatever it is, you have this beautiful V edge. You don't even have to put a border on it if you don't want to. Or you can seam it right there. So that is the front. That's your anatomy of a stitch there. And that's the back. That's the purl side. So we call that the purl or the bump. And that's the front.